The iPhone 12 series came out 3 years ago, and since then the iPhone 13, 14, and 15 have come out, each giving us marginal improvements that sort of added up over time. So by now, a lot of people are starting to think about upgrading their phones to the latest and greatest. But should you? Okay, so let's get some of the obvious downsides to having an older phone out of the way. If you have a 12 series, 11, or even 10 series, then your battery is probably already starting to deteriorate a bit. Now, I use my phone for regular tasks. I browse the web, social media, communicate with family and friends, all the good stuff. And so my battery has preserved itself quite well because I don't push my phone as some other people who use it for heavier tasks are. I also take really good care of my battery. I don't leave the phone plugged in all night, and I'll usually disconnect it before it ever reaches 100% battery. So in comparison to a newer phone, your battery will most likely be depleted in a day or maybe less, depending on how heavily you use it and also how big the battery of your phone is. Mine is still just fine, and I don't use it for very heavy tasks, and so I see my battery still lasting anywhere from a full day to a day and a half if I'm lucky. It's not even a big deal for me, to be honest, because as soon as I see that it goes below 10%, I just go in, plug it, and it's usually charged to about 80% in no time. Now, some people are always on the run and they need their batteries to last them a bit longer, and those people might see the biggest impact in upgrading their phone. But I think I can very confidently say that most of us probably do have at least one chance a day to just grab our phone and just plug it in or stick it in the wireless charger for a bit. Now, with the battery probably being the biggest downside to having an older phone, the only other real downside that's probably going to affect us in the future is iOS updates. Now, this year with iOS 17, the oldest devices to support the new OS are the XR, XS, and SE second generation or later. That means that Apple has stopped supporting the iPhone 8 series as well as the regular iPhone X. Now, I do have to say that I really do think that Apple is really good at updating their phones in the long term, and so by the time the update catches up to you, you will most likely be on a newer phone anyways. Now, if you still want to keep your old phone for a while, rest assured that Apple will probably still update this for the next 2 years maybe. Now, if you have an iPhone X or earlier, then this might actually be a really good year for you to upgrade, since those phones are definitely getting much older and they will no longer receive OS updates, but I do think that most of us are not on devices that old. Now, let's talk about probably the biggest reason as to why people like upgrading their phones every year: the cameras. The iPhone 12 Pro Max has an amazing set of cameras that still hold up well to this day. It's got a 12 megapixel set of cameras that include an ultra wide, a wide, and a telephoto. Now, I'm not going to get into specifics like the aperture and the HDR capabilities or anything like that, because I truly believe that most regular users don't really care about those specifications, and the ones that do know how to utilize them and how to make the best out of the cameras that they have. But honestly, these cameras are still great to this day. I never went out and took a photo and then thought, oh man, I wish these cameras had a bigger aperture or better HDR capabilities or anything like that. I mean, I just grabbed my phone, took it out, and shot a photo. And I think that's true for most of us. I think a lot of us just want to grab our phone, take it out, and take great looking photos or great looking video. Especially if it allows us to do that without having to fiddle around with a lot of confusing settings like a lot of professional cameras do. Now, if you think these cameras are outdated, just take a good look at what they can still do. As you can see, there's nothing outdated about these cameras. The iPhone 12 is still very capable of shooting nice, high quality, sharp image and video as well. Of course, some of the features in the newest 15 Pro series are nice, like the ability to shoot and log, which gives you more control over the image post-production, but we're talking about the average consumer here, and I can guarantee you that the average consumer won't care whether or not their phone shoots and log, because they probably don't even know what to do with the footage once it's outside of their phone. They just want to grab their phone, go out there and shoot good video and good photo. That's it. And these cameras are still really good at doing that. Now, of course, the cameras are just one part of the phone, so how does everything else compare to the latest and greatest? Spoiler alert, it's perfectly fine still. The Pro Max has a Super Retina XDR display that still gets plenty bright, both indoors and outdoors. In fact, when I first got the new phone, I couldn't even notice a difference between the two displays and their peak regular brightness. If it wasn't for the dynamic island, I'd probably think that they are the exact same display. The only real difference between these screens comes when the phones are presented with direct sunlight. The iPhone 15 Pro phones can get up to 2000 nits of peak brightness, which is helpful when you're presented with that specific situation to be able to see things on your screen better. The reality is that I've had my iPhone 12 Pro Max for several years now, and I can probably think of about maybe 2 situations in which I wanted the brightness to go up a little higher. I will also say that I'm not someone who's out a lot, and so take my experience with the brightness with a grain of salt. Your experience might be different if you're someone who's out in direct sunlight a lot, in which case the newer displays will probably benefit you more. The only other major difference between the 2 displays comes in the form of ProMotion. The new phones can refresh their screen up to 120 Hz and all the way down to 1 Hz to preserve battery with the always-on display, which, by the way, I turned off immediately because it was too distracting and I just didn't find a good use for it. For someone who does not have 2 iPhones and is holding them side by side while scrolling through their phone menus, this will not make a big difference. Apple has optimized their OS so well that even the 60 Hz older displays still feel snappy and look great in everyday use. Other than that, both displays are still OLED, both still have a 2,000,000:1 contrast ratio, HDR capabilities, beautiful color, and great resolution. So if you're upgrading to a new phone thinking that it'll be a huge difference, sorry to disappoint you, but not really. By the way, I was surprised to see that both devices are also splash, water, and dust resistant just the same. I thought Apple would have made them a bit better by now, but that is a good testament to how good the older phones are holding up to this day. Alright, let's talk performance. The new iPhone Pro series has the A17 Pro chip with a 6-core CPU, and it doesn't matter for most people again. Once again, I've gamed on this phone, shot video, photo, done pretty much everything with it, and not once have I ever thought, man, if I could only have more cores so that I can speed this up. I'm not trying to discredit what Apple has done with the newer chips, such as the ability to play full console games, which I actually hear that there's still very few of them, or some of the newer features associated with things like crash detection, or things like satellite connection, or things like that may be associated with the newer chips, or just in general with newer phones. Those things are great, especially if they're saving lives. I'm just saying that for most people, those things won't really matter because we very rarely find ourselves in those situations. So in my opinion, the extra power is great to have, just not necessary. There are very few features you're missing out on if you have one of these older phones. In fact, let's do some rapid shots. iOS 17, check. Face ID, check. MagSafe charging, check. The new contact posters, check. Stickers, which I'm ashamed I use too much of, check. Live widgets, check. The new number swap and file swap with AirDrop, check. The new upcoming journal app, check. No charging brick on the box to save money, the environment, check. In conclusion, this is still a great phone to have in 2023, and it will still be for 2024. I know a lot of us struggle with the decision to get the latest and greatest, especially if you're a tech nerd like me. I'm just here to tell you that unless you can get a really great deal for the newer phone, you're not really missing out on much if you don't upgrade. I'm really happy that these phones are made to last because that is how it should be. There's less e-waste in the world and people get to save money too. So if you were feeling bad for not upgrading your phone this year, don't. You still have a really great phone on your hands.